Hello, this is Brian, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the December 23rd issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Mexican Navy medical plane lost communication for several minutes before Texas crash. Air traffic controllers lost communication for about 10 minutes with a small Mexican Navy plane carrying a young medical patient and 7 others before it crashed off the Texas coast, killing at least 5 people, Mexico's president said Tuesday. Authorities initially believed the plane had landed safely at its destination in Galveston, near Houston, before learning it had gone down Monday afternoon, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said. The cause of the crash remains under investigation. A search and rescue operation in waters near Galveston pulled 2 survivors from the plane's wreckage, Mexico's Navy said, while 1 remained missing. 4 of the 8 people aboard were Navy officers and 4 were civilians, including a child, Mexico's Navy said. 2 of the passengers were affiliated with a nonprofit that helps transport Mexican children with severe burns to a hospital in Galveston. My condolences to the families of the sailors who unfortunately died in this accident and to the people who were traveling on board, Sheinbaum said in her morning press briefing. Without elaborating on a possible cause, what happened is very tragic. U.S. Coast Guard Petty Officer Luke Baker said at least 5 aboard had died but did not identify which passengers. The plane crashed Monday afternoon in a bay near the base of the causeway connecting Galveston Island to the mainland. Emergency responders rushed to the scene near the popular beach destination about 50 miles southeast of Houston. Sky Decker, a professional yacht captain who lives about a mile from the crash site, said he jumped in his boat to see if he could help. He picked up 2 police officers who guided him through thick fog to a nearly submerged plane. Decker jumped into the water and found a badly injured woman trapped beneath chairs and other debris. I couldn't believe she had maybe 3 inches of air gap to breathe in, he said. And there was jet fuel in there mixed with the water, fumes real bad. She was really fighting for her life. He said he also pulled out a man seated in front of her who had already died. Both were wearing civilian clothes. It's not immediately clear if weather was a factor. The area has been experiencing foggy conditions over the past few days, according to Cameron Batiste, National Weather Service meteorologist. He said that at about 2:30 p.m. Monday, a fog came in that had about half-mile visibility. Mexico's Navy said the plane was helping with a medical mission in coordination with the Michoud and Mao Foundation. In a social media post, the foundation said, "We express our deepest solidarity with the families in light of these events. We share their grief with respect and compassion, honoring their memory and reaffirming our commitment to providing humane, sensitive, and dignified care to children with burns." Teams from the Federal Aviation Administration and National Transportation Safety Board were at the crash site Monday, the Texas Department of Public Safety said. And a spokesperson for the NTSB said the agency was gathering information about the crash. The Galveston County Sheriff's Office said officials from its dive team, crime scene unit, drone unit, and patrol responded to the crash. She was pregnant when taken prisoner by Russia. This Ukrainian medic told captors her secret, and it may have saved her life. In the face of evil, a child is born. Artillery rattled the walls of the shell-blasted factory as Mariana Mamonova crouched in a latrine, rifling through her medic bag for a pregnancy test. Mariana, a combat medic with Ukraine's 36th Marine Brigade, was stationed in a bunker beneath the huge Ilyich Iron and Steel Works in Mariupol, the once beautiful port city now destroyed by Russian fire. She was among the last defenders of the besieged city. Thousands of soldiers and civilians were trapped in 2 steel plants without power, water, or food in what would become Mariupol's last stand in March 2022. Alongside them, she recalled, The Kalmius River was littered with bodies. There it was, the pregnancy test, sealed in its plastic sleeve, an unlikely object in this place of death, something carried out of habit and hope, not for her patients this time, for herself. The walls trembled again, dust wafted down. Any moment she'd be needed to tend to patients. Her hands moved quickly, tearing open the plastic. She set the test down. There was no water to flush, no privacy. The muffled cries of the wounded sifted down through the ceiling. The air smelled of smoke and iron. The test would take just a few minutes. Above her, the city burned. She thought about the many pregnancy tests she had taken before the war, each time filled with hope, each time crushed, when only a single red line appeared, the lonely red bar that meant no new life. 3 minutes, that was all it takes to learn if life had begun. She waited. She thought of her husband, Vasyl, who had escaped to their apartment in Lviv in Ukraine's far west. Was Russia attacking their home? Was Vasyl hearing the same blasts, feeling the same tremors? Was he even alive? On the eve of her deployment, they had sat together in the afternoon half-light, talking about laundry and the chance of snow. He was a lawyer with an easy smile, teasing that someday they'd have a little girl who looked just like her. She'd laughed. Soldiers didn't plan for their futures. Mariana is small and soft-spoken, with long auburn hair and bright, determined eyes. The sunflower-filled steppe outside Mariupol had become her second home through 4 deployments during the long, sporadically violent stalemate that followed Russia's partial invasion in 2014. The full invasion in February 2022 was different. Russian forces surrounded Mariupol, attacking, starving, and executing civilians. Missiles shrieked in from the sea, bombs fell from the sky, tanks advanced over the ground. Within weeks, tens of thousands were dead, and 90% of homes lay in ruins. Mariana worked with little rest, ducking blasts, dragging the injured from the rubble, stitching wounds by flashlight. She was not afraid to die. Capture was what terrified her. She told her comrades to shoot her before letting her fall into Russian hands. After weeks under fire, exhaustion overtook her. All she wanted was sleep, yet beneath the heaviness, something inside her felt different, something quietly, urgently alive. Now deep in the bunker, she looked at the test. 2 red lines bloomed on the strip. She stared, hands shaking. Life dared to continue, even here, under concrete and ash. Joy tangled with fear. She wanted to curse the test, beg it to be wrong, then hold it close because it was right. Then she cried. You are prisoners of the Russian Federation. In another time, she would have run to find a signal, text Vasyl, wrap herself in the warmth of that news. But here, any day, she might die, and Vasyl would have to live with the knowledge. Why burden him with a longed-for child that war might snatch from his heart? Mariana decided she would tell no one, not even him. She looked once more at the strip in her hand. The red lines were still there. She was a mother, a mother. The word felt foreign in her mouth, too soft for a battlefield. But she was not soft, she was strong. Even as death closed in on every side, she held a new, defiant mission. In the face of evil, she would live to sustain life. Her resolve was tested within a few days. Mariana and other soldiers had driven outside the plant to forage for supplies. Suddenly, a group of Russian fighters appeared, rifles leveled. Hello, comrades, one said. From now on, you are prisoners of the Russian Federation. So she faced a decision. She had sworn she would rather die than be taken alive. At that moment, dying would be easy. All she had to do was run. Instantly, she would be shot. She knew captivity meant horror, but her baby changed everything. She let the enemy soldiers strip off her helmet and vest, tie her wrists, and blindfold her. Now she understood. The bravest defiance was to stay alive. For the first 3 days, Mariana and her comrades were locked with other prisoners in an abandoned grain depot on the outskirts of Mariupol. They lay on concrete floors, stripped of medicine, sleeping bags, all personal items. Water was scarce, bread rationed to crumbs. On the 4th day, they were moved again. the Russians herded the prisoners into a truck. The road was cratered and lined with burned-out villages. When the convoy stopped an hour and a half later, Mariana saw 3 rows of barbed wire and lunging guard dogs. Olenivka, the most feared prison in occupied Ukraine. She was put in a cell built for 6 people. It held 40 women. The concrete floor was cold, the walls slick with damp. They took turns sleeping on the bunks and floor. They shared a single toilet, waking each time someone needed to use it. The toilet soon overflowed, and a stench filled the air. Then the torture began. Mariana was taken to a room where soldiers stripped her naked and started to beat her with sticks. So she made another decision. She would risk revealing her secret in hopes the guards would respect an unborn child. "I'm pregnant. Please don't hurt my baby," she pleaded. The men mocked her, sneering at her small frame, her thinness, the curve of her belly. They jeered, scoffing at the idea a man would desire someone like her. Then came her first interrogation, questions untethered from truth. Why did Ukraine attack Donbass? Who gives you orders? The Americans? They called her a propagandist, a medic to Nazis. Mariana answered carefully, her hands unsteady on her knees. She braced for another question. Instead, one of the guards handed her a phone. "You can make one call," he said. Vassil's voice quivered on the line in Lviv as he realized she was alive. She had rehearsed the words for weeks but could barely form them. She was pregnant. Silence. Then, What is happening?" Vassil said, his voice tight with disbelief, then through tears. "I'm so happy, just not under these circumstances." Both were crying when the guard ended the call. It was mercy and manipulation at once, a reminder that her fate and their child's no longer belonged just to her. "Mariana, aren't you dead yet?" Days passed, then weeks. Mariana was interrogated often. She was stripped, mocked, photographed, left naked in the cold. But other women fared worse. Beatings with fists and batons. Many were tortured, given electric shocks, kept awake for days, sexually humiliated. One was scalded with boiling water. Mariana's choice to reveal her secret might have made her beatings less severe. When the lights went out, vents and stairwells rang with the sounds of men being tortured, screams that rose and fell as guards beat them for hours with metal rods, rifle butts, and electric cables until there was only silence. Some were raped or assaulted with sticks, others tied to pipes and shocked until their bodies convulsed, as reported by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. Each day she saw men carried past her cell, broken and unrecognizable. Many didn't survive. Every night, fear for the heartbeat inside her kept Mariana awake. She made a promise to the baby she carried she would never lose control. When she heard the rip of duct tape being pulled from a roll, she knew another man was about to be taped to a chair and tortured. Each time that tearing sound came, she pressed a hand to her stomach and repeated the vow. One night, when she heard the sound yet again, once more she pressed her stomach and told her child she would be brave. Then something shifted under her hand, a faint stirring so delicate she almost missed it. For a moment she froze, unsure if her body had betrayed her, but there it was, another small flutter. For the first time, she had felt her baby move. The agony around her did not relent, yet life answered back. Every day, each prisoner had barely a liter and a half of water to drink and wash with. The skin on Mariana's lips were cracked. Her mouth tasted of rust. A month passed before she was allowed to shower. She stood beneath freezing water, no soap, no towel, just the shock of it on her bones. Then she pulled her filthy clothes back on, the fabric stiff with dirt and sweat. Fresh air became a luxury. The prison was a decaying Soviet-era juvenile colony, its windows long shattered and later sealed so even daylight was kept out. On rare occasions, when they were allowed outside, the women shuffled around a walled yard where the sky was a narrow strip of gray, and armed men watched from the perimeter. The prisoners walked in silence, their breath visible in the cold, their faces tilted toward the sliver of sky. Back inside, in overcrowded cells, the air was thick and sour. Sickness spread quickly, settling in lungs and throats, coughs echoing down the corridor. With just one meal of thin soup and 2 slices of bread each day, Mariana weakened rapidly. Her movements slowed, her muscles wasted. She feared the baby was starving too. She worried that its small movements had become less frequent. Long stretches of stillness inside her became their own kind of terror. Sometimes guards forgot to distribute food, extending fasting periods for a day or more. Mariana tried to imagine the meals she and her husband once shared. One night she dreamed of eating sugar-powdered donuts with cherries. She thought about donuts and cherries for days and hoped to dream about them again. Months slipped by, yet her body barely changed. It wasn't until her 6th month that even a small curve began to show. As Mariana grew weaker, other women began to share what little they could: stolen cucumbers, a slice of tomato, scraps from the garden behind the colony. A sympathetic officer occasionally let her pick from the gardens herself, and she tucked a few vegetables under her clothes to bring back to the others. The taste of something fresh and the quiet act of sharing it reminded her that mercy could exist even there. One day the guards pulled her from her cell and locked her in a cage. Then they sat around the cage and ate in front of her, an apple, a piece of bread, slowly, deliberately. The sound of their chewing filled the air. She could smell the sweetness of the fruit and feel her stomach twist with hunger. She worried her baby felt it too. Deprivation was just the beginning. Soon the threats turned to the life inside her. The guards walked by daily with the same line: "Mariana, aren't you dead yet?" "No," she'd answer, "maybe tomorrow." The next day it would start again. "Still not dead?" "Not yet." The guards thought they were mocking her, but each "not yet" became a silent vow that the small heartbeat within her would defy the regime that wished it silent. "Nothing's left of your boys there." The killer interrogations happened again and again. The guards called her a murderer, fascist, Nazi, telling her one Russian soul was worth 20 of hers. She was repeatedly forced to proclaim that Ukrainian soldiers had shot civilians to recite lies as confessions. If she ever returned to Ukraine and told the truth about what had been done inside the prison, the Russians warned her family would be found and punished. As her due date neared, guards told Mariana that once she gave birth, the child would be taken and never returned. "Your infant will be transported deep into Russia," one threatened. "It will be moved from orphanage to orphanage so that you'll never see it again." But the Russians had a far worse plan for Ukrainian men in the prison. They built a new prison block not far from the women's and moved about 200 men into it, most from Mariupol. Then late one night in July 2022, Mariana heard 2 enormous blasts, strong enough she felt the walls tremble. The guards rushed out in panic and returned minutes later, smelling of smoke. The new barracks had exploded and was burning to the ground. "Nothing's left of your boys there," one of the guards said. Mariana asked to be allowed to help tend to the injured, but the women remained confined to their cell. Through the vents, she could smell something pungent, rancid, and she heard the shouts of men carrying bodies across the yard. The reek of smoke and burned flesh lingered for days. She waited for the sound of footsteps coming for a block next. At first, guards claimed Ukraine had attacked the prison. A few hours later, they changed their story, muttering that it had been something from inside. Independent investigations later found Russia had deliberately attacked the prison as a cover for torture and execution. The blast left more than 50 dead and 100 wounded. Many prisoners lost track of time, but Mariana's swelling body reminded her time was moving forward. Each night she pressed her palm against her abdomen, reassured when she felt the faint movement of her baby. Around her, so many mothers had been separated from their children and missed them desperately. Some feared they were dead. For them, motherhood was a wound. For Mariana, it was the sole thing keeping her alive. Then one day in August, when Mariana was about 8 months pregnant, a guard came to her cell. "We're taking you to Donetsk to give birth," he said. Mariana was worried. Donetsk, 25 kilometers away, had been under Russian control since 2014. She had no idea what kind of treatment she might receive. At the hospital, a doctor examined her for the first time. "Your baby is severely underweight," he said in Russian. For a moment, Mariana felt frightened. Then the baby shifted, as if to say, "I'm still here." In the hospital, the staff gave her food and medicine. She felt her strength coming back. But even kindness felt dangerous. She was certain that if she gave birth there, the infant would be taken, and she would never see her again. At night, she lay in her narrow bed and whispered to the child. "Not yet," she told her. "Wait until the fields are golden and the sky is blue." A month later, with Mariana nearly full term, she dreamed of a little girl. The dream was so vivid that she awoke feeling joyful. As she opened her eyes, a Russian officer appeared in the doorway and said she was to be transferred. No one told her where. Her hands were bound. A blindfold was pulled tight across her eyes. Once again, Mariana was forced into a military transport vehicle with its stone-hard seats and smell of diesel. She was taken to Taganrog, another prison known for torture. So it would begin again, she thought. Where would her child be born, and what would happen to the baby then? But Mariana and others were transferred to another vehicle which took them to an airport. Still blindfolded, she was pushed by soldiers on board a military plane, her body heavy. What was happening? She knew some prisoners had been taken to Mordovia, a republic deep inside Russia, where survival would be even harder. It sounded like a slow, prop-driven plane, and the journey seemed to go on forever. Mariana was sitting near the front, and as the plane descended, she overheard the pilot talking to ground control. They were landing in Belarus. Why would anyone fly us to Belarus, she thought. Belarus was Russia's ally. She imagined still more prisons, a hospital where they would take her child away. But another thought stole in. A prisoner exchange, could it be? A door opened in her mind, just a fraction. Maybe they were going home. After disembarking, soldiers led prisoners to buses. These ones were clean, the seats soft, hope edged in, leaving room for little else. That day in the bus, in the soft seats, the endless journey entered its last lap. From Belarus, the buses traveled just a few miles to the border of northwestern Ukraine. It stopped, then started again. It crossed the border into Chernihiv Oblast. Mariana began to cry. The tears came before she even understood. She spoke to her child, stroking her belly, as if to calm them both. "Okay," she whispered, "we're home now. You can be born. Everything is good. We're home." A few hours later, at a hospital in the city of Lutsk, close to their home, Vasil was waiting. When Mariana saw him, she thought it must still be a dream. She was thin, trembling from exhaustion, yet in his arms, her world steadied. They didn't speak, they just held each other. Between them was an unmistakable reminder that life had outlasted the campaign to destroy it. 4 days later, she gave birth to a girl, a quiet miracle of fierce, improbable life. They named her Anna Marie for grace and for the Virgin Mary, the saint who keeps watch over humanity. She was pink-cheeked and strong, as if she already knew the world she had entered and meant to endure it. Mariana had carried her through death's corridors, and now life at last had claimed its victory. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Medicaid paid more than $207 million for dead people. A new law could help fix that. Medicaid programs made more than $200 million in improper payments to healthcare providers between 2021 and 2022 for people who had already died, according to a new report from the independent watchdog for the Department of Health and Human Services. But the department's Office of Inspector General said it expects a new provision in Republicans' One Big Beautiful Bill requiring states to audit their Medicaid beneficiary lists may help reduce these improper payments in the future. These kinds of improper payments are not unique to one state, and the issue continues to be persistent. Anair Sanchez, Assistant Regional Inspector General in the Office of Audit Services, told the Associated Press. Sanchez has been researching this issue for a decade. The Watchdog report, released Tuesday, said more than $207.5 million in managed care payments were made on behalf of deceased enrollees between July 2021 to July 2022. The office recommends that the federal government share more information with state governments to recover the incorrect payments, including a Social Security database known as the Full Death Master File, which contains more than 142 million records going back to 1899. Sharing the Full Death Master File data has been tightly restricted due to privacy laws which protect against identity theft and fraud. The massive tax and spending bill that was signed into law by President Donald Trump this summer expands how the Full Death Master File can be used by mandating Medicaid agencies to quarterly audit their provider and beneficiary lists against the file, beginning in 2027. The intent is to stop payments to dead people and improve accuracy. Tuesday's report is the first nationwide look at improper Medicaid payments. Since 2016, HHS's Inspector General has conducted 18 audits on a selection of state programs and had identified that Medicaid agencies had improperly made managed care payments on behalf of deceased enrollees, totaling approximately $289 million. The government had some success using the Full Death Master File to prevent improper payments earlier this year. In January, the Treasury Department reported that it had clawed back more than $31 million in federal payments that improperly went to dead people as part of a 5-month pilot program after Congress gave Treasury temporary access to the file for 3 years as part of the 2021 appropriations bill. Meanwhile, the SSA has been making unusual updates to the file itself, adding and removing records and complicating its use. For instance, the Trump administration in April moved to classify thousands of living immigrants as dead and cancel their Social Security numbers to crack down on immigrants who had been temporarily allowed to live in the U.S. under programs started during the Biden administration. 3 inmates captured in Florida after escape from jail near Atlanta. 3 inmates who escaped from a jail east of Atlanta, including one who was being held on a murder charge, have been apprehended in Florida, a member of a federal fugitive task force confirmed. Eric Hines, Assistant Chief Inspector with the U.S. Marshals Service Southeast Regional Fugitive Task Force, declined to share further details ahead of a news conference planned in Atlanta later Tuesday. The inmate's escape from DeKalb County Jail was discovered early Monday during a routine security check, the county sheriff's office said. "We take this breach very seriously and are working diligently to ensure these individuals are safely returned to custody as quickly as possible," DeKalb County Sheriff Melody Maddox said in a statement before the inmates were recaptured. Authorities have not shared details about how the escape was carried out. The jail is in Decatur, about 10 miles east of downtown Atlanta. The inmates range in age from 24 to 31, with the youngest one charged with murder and armed robbery. Other 2 inmates face charges that include armed robbery and arson. The sheriff's office had warned that the men might be armed and were considered dangerous after their escape. The inmate accused of murder and armed robbery, Stevenson Charles, 24, has had several run-ins with law officers in Georgia and Florida. He had been sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to multiple counts of kidnapping and bank robbery, a federal agent wrote in a Monday affidavit regarding the recent jail escape. After being sentenced, the agent wrote, Charles was turned over to DeKalb County authorities on December 5th to face the murder charge, details of which were not immediately available. A federal criminal complaint charging him with the escape does not list an attorney who could be contacted to comment on his behalf, and it wasn't clear whether he has one at this early stage of the case. In one of multiple cases involving Charles in South Florida, he is accused of meeting a man through the Grindr online dating application and then pulling a gun on him when they met in person at a Miami residence in 2022. Charles then drove the man to various Miami area banks, withdrawing money from the victims' accounts, court records show. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. What to know about aid entering Gaza, the other battle between Israel and Hamas. 2.5 months have passed since Gaza's latest ceasefire took effect, and the supplies being delivered to war-battered Palestinians are again the subject of fierce debate. The underlying question is whether Israel is upholding a key commitment under the U.S.-backed ceasefire by allowing enough humanitarian aid into the territory. Israel says it is, but that claim is disputed by data from humanitarian organizations and Hamas-linked Gaza authorities. The debate plays out in numbers of trucks said to be entering Gaza, but that tells only part of the story. Most trucks are operated by the private sector and carry commercial goods that are unaffordable to many Palestinians. Here's what to know about the dispute. Israel's claims about trucks. The ceasefire calls for a minimum of 600 trucks a day, though it's not clear whether that figure refers specifically to aid trucks. Israel says it has met that stipulation since the ceasefire took effect on October 10th. Its closest ally, the United States, which coordinates aid deliveries from a hub in southern Israel, says Israel has met it for the last 5 weeks. But about 80% of those trucks are private sector vehicles, according to the Israeli military agency in charge of coordinating aid to Gaza, known as Kogat. The effects are mixed. Markets in Gaza are now better stocked, and high prices for essentials such as flour and meat have begun to ease. But most people cannot afford the goods after 2 years of war, and many commercial items like cigarettes, cell phones, and snacks don't address widespread malnutrition. Commercial supplies are often prioritized ahead of aid deliveries, yet do not address humanitarian needs, the nonprofit Refugees International said in a statement last week. Kogat says about 70% of the trucks are carrying food, and the remainder carry medical equipment, shelter supplies, tents, clothing, and other essential humanitarian assistance. The agency would not give a breakdown of raw data, saying that sharing such details would benefit Hamas. A Kogat-run data dashboard on Gaza aid stopped updating after the ceasefire began. Other measures of trucks. Rights groups and others point out that Israel controls the crossings into Gaza and has sole access to track how much aid and how many commercial goods are entering. There is little transparency about how much and what exactly is getting in, said Shaina Low, communications advisor for the Norwegian Refugee Council. Global food security experts last week said all of Gaza is in danger of starvation, but that the spread of famine beyond Gaza City, where it was declared in August, had been averted. Israel disputed the report, calling it distorted and biased. Last week's report undercut Israel's claims. The authors, citing data they said was provided by Israel, said an average of 540 trucks, both aid and commercial ones, entered Gaza daily in October since a ceasefire, and that the November average was 581. Both numbers fall below the 600 truck requirement. Meanwhile, entities inside Gaza assert that the number of trucks is even smaller. A report issued this week by the World Food Program said an average of 256 trucks carrying both aid and commercial goods entered daily in the first 2 weeks of December. The report cited the Gaza Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Hamas-affiliated Palestinian Ministry of State for Relief Affairs. It was not clear why those numbers differ so much from Israel's. The WFP report also noted that even the entry of commercial goods often faces a complex system of approvals and exorbitant fees reaching several $1,000s per truck entering through the Rafah crossing with Egypt and from the occupied West Bank. that drives up prices of essential items such as eggs and vegetables. Beyond the private sector, the non-commercial trucks entering Gaza, or about 20% of the traffic, carry out deliveries for the United Nations and aid groups or for various countries. Israel's government does not provide aid to Gaza. The UN's data dashboard tracks how much aid from its agencies and partners is unloaded at Gaza border crossings and how much reaches intended destinations. No independent entity tracks aid donated by international governments. From October 10th, when the ceasefire began, through December 21st, 9,379 trucks reached intended destinations in Gaza, and food made up over 80% of that aid by weight. That means about 130 trucks a day on average reached their destinations during that period. The dashboard shows that 156 other trucks during that time were intercepted by hungry crowds or armed gangs. But the amounts inside the trucks can vary sharply because of Israeli restrictions, which include the denial of items Israel believes could be used for military purposes, such as tents with aluminum frames. Such inconsistencies led to reduced food rations earlier this month, with some households in Gaza receiving rations covering 75% of minimum caloric needs to reach as many people as possible, according to the World Food Program. The effect on hunger. Last week's report by the world's leading authority on food crises said there have been notable improvements in food security in Gaza since the ceasefire. But the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, said the situation remains highly fragile. The report said Gaza's needs remain immense and unhindered aid is required. Palestinians have told the Associated Press that even though Gaza's markets have more products these days, most people can't afford them. Access is deeply unequal, the International Rescue Committee's Vice President for Emergencies, Bob Kitchen, said after the IPC report. He added, much of the food entering Gaza is also low in nutritional value, such as sweets and sugary drinks, which does little to support recovery from malnutrition. Trump says he's inviting Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to next year's G20 summit in Miami. President Donald Trump said he will be extending invitations to next year's U.S.-hosted Group of 20 summit to Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan as the Republican administration looks to deepen its relationship with the Central Asian nations. Trump announced the plan on Tuesday after holding separate phone calls with Kazakhstan President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev and Uzbekistan President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. Neither country is a member of the G20, but the host country of the annual leaders gathering of major economies often invites non-members to attend the summit. The 2026 gathering is planned for Trump's golf club in Doral, Florida, near Miami. The relationship with both countries is spectacular, Trump said in a social media post about the calls. Trump is currently on vacation at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. The Kazakh and Uzbek leaders visited Washington last month, along with the leaders of Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan for talks with Trump. The administration is giving greater attention to Central Asia, which holds deep reserves of minerals and produces roughly half the world's uranium, as it intensifies the hunt for rare earth metals needed for high-tech devices, including smartphones, electric vehicles, and fighter jets. Central Asia's critical mineral exports have long tilted toward China and Russia. During last month's visit, Tokayev announced that his Muslim-majority country will join the Abraham Accords, the Trump administration effort to strengthen ties between Israel and Arab and Muslim-majority countries. The largely symbolic move came as the administration is trying to revive an initiative that was the signature foreign policy achievement of Trump's first term, when his administration forged diplomatic and commercial ties between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco. Trump last month announced that he is barring South Africa from participating in next year's summit at his Miami area club and will stop all payments and subsidies to the country over its treatment of a U.S. government representative at this year's meeting. Trump chose not to have an American government delegation attend this year's summit hosted by South Africa, saying he did so because its white Afrikaners were being violently persecuted. It is a claim that South Africa, which was mired for decades in racial apartheid, has rejected as baseless. Louvre tightens security after $102 million jewel heist, installs bars on infamous window. A freight lift rose up on its crane Tuesday toward the Louvre Museum, but this time it wasn't jewel thieves. It was workers installing security bars on the window used to break into the Paris landmark's Apollo Gallery in October's stunning heist. The world's most visited museum is slowly coming to terms with security failing exposed by the theft, while investigators hunt for missing crown jewels worth $102 million. With the Louvre closed Tuesday, maintenance workers in security helmets and high-visibility vests mounted a freight lift to a second-floor balcony to secure new metal bars outside a now infamous window. The sight mirrored what happened October 19th when a team of thieves posing as workers used a similar lift, then sliced through the window to enter the gallery. They grabbed tiaras, emerald earrings, a sapphire necklace, and other treasures, and 8 minutes later they were gone. All 4 suspected thieves have been arrested and charged, but the jewels haven't been found. Samuel Lasnell of maintenance lift company Grimon Nacelles said he and his crew arrived before dawn Tuesday to carry out the high-profile window securing operation. We have already worked at the Louvre on the exterior, inside and outside the pyramid. We've been here several times, he told the Associated Press. The Louvre knows us well. The Louvre didn't publicly comment about Tuesday's security operation. Major Russian drone and missile attack on Ukraine kills at least 3 people and cuts power. Russia fired more than 650 drones and 36 missiles at Ukraine in a large-scale attack that began during the night and stretched into daylight hours Tuesday, officials said. At least 3 people were killed, including a 4-year-old child, 2 days before Christmas. The barrage struck homes and the power grid in 13 regions of Ukraine, causing widespread outages and bitter temperatures, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said, a day after he described recent progress in finding a peace deal as quite solid. The bombardment demonstrated Russian President Vladimir Putin's intention of pursuing the invasion of Ukraine, Zelensky said in a post on the Telegram messaging app. Ukrainian and European officials have complained that Putin is not sincerely engaging with U.S.-led peace efforts. The attack is an extremely clear signal of Russian priorities, Zelensky said. A strike before Christmas when people want to be with their families at home in safety. A strike, in fact, in the midst of negotiations that are being conducted to end this war. Putin cannot accept the fact that we must stop killing. U.S. President Donald Trump has for months been pressing for a peace agreement, but the negotiations have become entangled in the very different demands from Moscow and Kiev. U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff said Sunday he held productive and constructive talks in Florida with Ukrainian and European representatives. Trump was less effusive Monday, saying the talks are going along. Initial reports from Ukrainian emergency services said the child died in Ukraine's northwestern Sandomir region, while a drone killed a woman in the Kiev region, and another civilian death was recorded in the western Kamenetsky region, according to Zelensky. Russia launched 635 drones of various types and 38 missiles, Ukraine's Air Force said. Air defenses stopped 587 drones and 34 missiles, it said. It was the 9th large-scale Russian attack on Ukraine's energy system this year and left multiple regions in the West without power, while emergency power outages were in place across the country. Acting Energy Minister Artem Nekrasov said, "Work to restore power would begin as soon as the security situation permitted," he said. Ukraine's largest private energy supplier, DTEK, said the attack targeted thermal power stations in what it said was the seventh major strike on the company's facilities since October. DTEK's thermal power plants have been hit more than 220 times since Russia's full-scale invasion began in February 2022. Those attacks have killed 4 workers and wounded 59. Authorities in the western regions of Rivne, Ternopil, and Lviv, as well as the northern Sumy region, reported damage to energy infrastructure or power outages after the attack. In the southern Odessa region, Russia struck energy, port, transport, industrial, and residential infrastructure, according to regional head Ole Kuiper. A merchant ship and over 120 homes were damaged, he said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. U.S. signs new health deals with 9 African countries that mirror Trump's priorities. The U.S. government has signed health deals with at least 9 African countries, part of its new approach to global health funding, with agreements that reflect the Trump administration's interests and priorities and are geared toward providing less aid and more mutual benefits. The agreements signed so far with Kenya, Nigeria, and Rwanda, among others, are the first under the new Global Health Framework, which makes aid dependent on negotiations between the recipient country and the U.S. Some of the countries that have signed deals either have been hit by U.S. aid cuts or have separate agreements with the Trump administration to accept and host third country deportees, although officials have denied any linkage. The Trump administration says the new America First global health funding agreements are meant to increase self-sufficiency and eliminate what it says are ideology and waste from international assistance. The deals replace a patchwork of previous health agreements under the now dismantled United States Agency for International Development. U.S. aid cuts have crippled health systems across the developing world, including in Africa, where many countries relied on the funding for crucial programs, including those responding to outbreaks of disease. The new approach to global health aligns with President Donald Trump's pattern of dealing with other nations transactionally, using direct talks with foreign governments to promote his agenda abroad. It builds on a sharp turn from traditional U.S. foreign assistance, which supporters say furthered American interests by stabilizing other countries and economies and building alliances. A different strategy. The deal marks a sharp departure from how the U.S. has provided health care funding over the years and mirrors the Trump administration's interests. South Africa, which has lost most of its U.S. funding, including $400 million in annual support, due in part to its disputes with the U.S., has not signed a health deal, despite having one of the world's highest HIV prevalence rates. Nigeria, Africa's most populous country, reached a deal, but with an emphasis on Christian-based health facilities, although it has a slight majority Muslim population. Rwanda and Uganda, which each have deportation deals with the U.S., have announced the health pacts. Cameroon, Eswatini, Lesotho, Liberia, and Mozambique also are among those that have signed health deals with the U.S. According to the Center for Global Development, a Washington think tank, the deals combine U.S. funding reductions, ambitious co-financing expectations, and a shift toward direct government-to-government assistance. The deals represent a reduction in total U.S. health spending for each country, the center said, with annual U.S. financial support down 49% compared with 2024. a faith-based deal in Nigeria, a lifeline for several others. Under its deal, Nigeria, a major beneficiary of USAID funds, would get support that has a strong emphasis on Christian faith-based healthcare providers. The U.S. provided approximately $2.3 billion in health assistance to Nigeria between 2021 and 2025, mostly through USAID, official data shows. The new 5-year agreement will see U.S. support at over $2 billion, while Nigeria is expected to raise $2.9 billion to boost its healthcare programs. The agreement was negotiated in connection with reforms the Nigerian government has made to prioritize protecting Christian populations from violence and includes significant dedicated funding to support Christian healthcare facilities, the State Department said in a statement. The department said the President and Secretary of State retain the right to pause or terminate any programs which do not align with the national interest, urging Nigeria to ensure that it combats extremist religious violence against vulnerable Christian populations. For several other countries, the new deals could be a lifeline after U.S. aid cuts crippled their healthcare systems and left them racing to fill the gaps. Under its deal, Mozambique will get U.S. support of over $1.8 billion for HIV and malaria programs. Lesotho, one of the poorest countries in the world, clinched a deal worth over $232 million. In the tiny kingdom of Eswatini, the U.S. committed to provide up to $205 million to support public health data systems, disease surveillance, and outbreak response, while the country agreed to increase domestic health expenditures by $37 million. No deal for South Africa after disputes. South Africa is noticeably absent from the list of signatories following tensions with the Trump administration. Trump has said he will cut all financial assistance to South Africa over his widely rejected claims that it is violently persecuting its Afrikaner white minority. The dismantling of USAID resulted in the loss of over $436 million in yearly financing for HIV treatment and prevention in South Africa, putting the program and thousands of jobs in the healthcare industry at risk. Health compacts with countries that signed deportation deals. At least 4 of the countries that have reached deals previously agreed to receive third country deportees from the U.S., a controversial immigration policy that has been a trademark of the Trump administration. The State Department has denied any linkage between the healthcare compacts and agreements regarding accepting third country asylum seekers or third country deportees from the United States. However, officials have said that political considerations unrelated to health issues may be part of the negotiations. Rwanda, one of the countries with a deportation deal with the U.S., signed a $228 million health pact, requiring the U.S. to support it with $158 million. Uganda, another such country, signed a health deal worth nearly $2.3 billion, in which the U.S. will provide up to $1.7 billion. Also, Eswatini, which has started receiving flights with deported prisoners from the U.S. Nigerians welcome 130 school children and teachers released after mass abduction. Nigerians on Monday got their first look at 130 children and teachers released after being seized in one of the largest mass abductions in the country's history. Some of the children appeared to be malnourished or in shock as they arrived at a government ceremony. Police said they were freed Sunday, a month after gunmen stormed their Catholic school in Niger State's Peperi community in a pre-dawn attack. Authorities said plans were underway to reunite the children with their families before Christmas. Authorities earlier said 303 school children and 12 teachers were seized, and 50 of them escaped in the hours that followed. But on Monday, Niger State Governor Mohamed Bago indicated that 230 had been taken and all had now been released. School kidnappings have come to define insecurity in Africa's most populous country. Officials did not say whether a ransom, common in such abductions, had been paid. No group has claimed responsibility, but residents blamed armed gangs that target schools and travelers in kidnappings for ransom across Nigeria's conflict-battered north. Most of those seized in the attack were aged between 10 and 17, the school said. One of the children, released earlier, told the Associated Press that gunmen threatened to shoot them during the attack. Major General Adumu Garba Laka, national coordinator at Nigeria's Center for Counterterrorism, told Monday's event that Nigeria will work with community leaders to boost safety in high-risk areas. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the December 23rd issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Brian. Thank you for listening.